And we are live. JT here. Welcome to The Huddle. The Huddle is where I sit down with successful people from the world of sport and coaching. It's to learn more about their journey to greatness. Why do I have these conversations? Because success always leaves clues. I just want to welcome you, whether you are joining us live as we stream into our Facebook community, whether you are watching the replay on YouTube or on Facebook, whether you're listening to the audio on the podcast. Thank you so much for being here with me and my special guest today. And here's my reminder to you. The mind is like a parachute. It works best when it's wide open. My challenge to you is to keep your mind wide open. And I guarantee you that you will gain a valuable nugget of wisdom that will most importantly help you succeed at the game of life. I'm really enthused for my conversations with my special guests today. This is the first time we actually have a three-way conversation going on here. So again, that's the beauty of life, is just trying something new and having fun doing it. My guests in the huddle today are the program managers with the CFLPA for the Academy. My guest in the huddle today is Jason Langvee and Scott Armstrong. How are you today, brothers?
Thanks for having us, JT. Great to be here. Hello from the West Coast as well.
Doing great. Thanks so much for having us as well. I'm here in Ontario, but spanning the country like we do in the CFL.
Nice. I love it. Well, hey, brothers, one thing that I'm a big believer in is that to be intentional with always counting your blessings. And what I'm counting my blessings for is that I'm a firm believer that our time and energy is our most valuable resource. So thank you so much for being able to share some of your time and energy with me and our community today. So thank you again, brothers.
That's an easy yes on this side there, JT.
Well, and echoing that, it takes time on your side to put this together and to host this. So thank you for your time and energy into this as well.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. So one of the things that I often like to remind people is that life is a game and games are supposed to be fun. So I'm curious, what is an interesting fact, some may call a quirk, that maybe a lot of people don't know about you, that you would be open to sharing with our community? And maybe just put you on, Jason.
Well, I know it's funny because Scott's the one with the saxophone in the background there, but in my free time, which is becoming harder and harder to come by as a new dad, but in my free time, I am ecstatic about writing, playing, anything to do with music. And so that's a lifelong passion that I admittedly even turned off with other focuses for periods of time, but I found my way back and that is therapy to me. And so that's maybe a fun, quirky little fact about myself that's not necessarily broadcast on the professional football side.
I love it.
If I was to offer something, JT, and I know it's being recorded, so we'll give you that kind of version, but I love adventure in all kinds of life. And 12 years ago, a friend called me and said, "Hey, Scott, they're having auditions for dancing in the Olympics, the closing ceremonies. Why don't you go?" And if you've ever met me, I'm like a short, squat brick. Like I don't belong in a dance audition, but I did go to that, and I got a gig on it. And somewhere in February of 2010, I had managed to lift my feet in front of about 4 billion people or 2 billion people on television and dance the opening ceremony. So that's something nobody would ever think of this frame doing. So there you go.
I love that you asked the question because I never knew that, and I've been working with
I've been trying to hide it from you, Jason.
I'm all over YouTube this afternoon. Thank you.
Well, it's interesting. And what I really heard from both of you was it was interesting that both of you shared something creative you've done. And why that resonates with me is I'm a firm believer that creative arts are something that everyone should aspire and strive to do, because there's this implied risk-taking there, right? That you might not know everything, but you just jump with 2 feet in and you learn to become okay in uncertainty and not having to, you sort of embrace imperfection and release the illusion of perfection, right? So that's what I really love about what both of you shared.
Well, if I can jump off of that personally, the reason it's therapy is exactly that. I mean, it's dealing with the fact that I've got high expectations every time I try and sit down, and getting over that. That's therapeutic. That's taking it easier on yourself, but also understanding it's a growth mindset. You have to have an open mindset, that open parachute to get better. And that also means that you have to be willing to, put pen to paper, so to speak, and see that it maybe not as good the first time, but keep working on it. And again, creativity, again, if I can lean into Scott a little bit more, I mean, he's got a lot of passions, but he's also a brilliant writer. And that's another thing that I'm sure he can talk ad nauseum about what he does in his spare time as well.
Mm-hmm.
Jason, you are the cheerleader of my fan club, so we're going to stop the mutual admiration piece for a moment. But
well,
Jason,
I'll take my opportunity here. I've got 2 books on my desk, and I think we've got "You Are Greatness" by JT, and we've got "True Cost" by Scott Armstrong. So here's my plug.
Okay.
To your sense there, JT, on the creativity piece, sports analogy wise, is that we get so busy in life, we're like reactors. We're receiving the balls all the time and trying to do something. And when you go creative, you turn the game around. You're putting something out there. You're actually serving the ball. You're hitting the ball to a place that you don't know where it's going to go. And that's really where the growth, and I think for Jason and I, it's quite evident, that's where the fun is. That's where the juice is.
Yeah, no, I think it's both great reminders on both your parts. So I'm curious, obviously you have right now, you're currently serving, right, the world of sport. So I'm curious, sport has obviously played an important role in your life up to this point, right? You're serving there now. I'm curious from both of you, what is the one lesson that you've taken from sport that you still find yourself applying to your life today? And we'll switch it up. Scott?
I think it's that sense of resilience. My background's more hockey than football, but we've all had great games where we've played well and still not had the outcome that we wanted to. So, being in a sport like that where there's so many variables, you're just not guaranteed of any outcome. You apply that to your education, you apply that to your career, to anything in life. It helps you deal with, as Jason was saying before, some uncertainties where some people who don't know sport don't have to grit it out. Sometimes they wilt. And so, I think that resiliency piece is really the piece I would take away from that.
Yeah, and admittedly, I'm a little bit more of a hockey player historically than football, because I played football throughout all of my youth. But when the opportunity stopped and I stopped being good enough, and that's probably the wrong verbiage, but I stopped perceiving being good enough to compete at the collegiate or past levels, I got back into playing hockey as a 20-year-old and realized again that the way that I get better is to not think that, I have to be a certain way. It's to take it as a growth mindset, open, the child's mind where it's, I've got these skills. How do I get better on these skills? And that's where I realized that, at 20 years old, I could get better at hockey still. Well, if I get better at hockey skill, then I know I could get better at speaking publicly. I know I could get better at articulating my messages within my organization, things of that nature, right? And it's confidence building. It's building a term I like to delve back into my psychology terms, is self-efficacy, your belief in your ability to complete a task. And that's potentially task specific, but I think that skill itself is also relevant beyond individual skills. If you believe in yourself and you know how to believe in yourself, you're probably going to be able to do that amongst a myriad of different things that you come into contact with.
And, it's interesting what you both shared, right? I know, Scott, you're talking about resiliency, Jason, start to hear these concepts around like self-image, confidence and all that. And it's really interesting because I think what came up for me there is that our self-image, or what we think is possible for us, does play a big role into the results that we actually achieve in our life. And one of the things I often like to remind people is that what has happened up to this point is no indication of your future potential, right? And I think that sort of sums up kind of the work you're doing right now with the Academy. So I'm curious, I'd love to know more about the Academy and what it's focused on, and what was sort of the inspiration that, got you into doing this work. Let's go back. I will play a little fun. Scott, we'll go back and
No problem. And just to wrap up that other point, JT, about belief, I just love that saying. It's a cliche, but it doesn't mean it's any less true. It says, whether you believe you can or not, you're probably right. And, for folks who are listening to that, whatever, career you're looking at or activity, I'm 60 this year, and I didn't pick up volleyball till I was 45. I'm playing competitive volleyball. I'm a short guy. My self-image is everybody can jump a foot higher than me. They dive a lot faster than I do. But my self-image is I'm going to keep on working at that to be the best volleyball player I can be, or whatever it is. So don't let other people's perception of you drive the direction of your life. This is your voice. It's your one shot to really do what you want to do. Now, if you can rewind me, the genesis of the academy, is that the piece that we were looking at?
Yeah. So what was sort of the inspiration to get, to serve others through the academy?
Yeah, and Jason and I both know the story. Jason, okay if I give 30-second start to that one?
No, you're the right person to start it, as you were here before I was.
So before working with the CFLPA, I worked with the Canadian military and did a similar thing where I'd go across to Canada to the different bases, and I'd work with the guys and gals who were about to transition out of the military and start their own businesses. And one day I was in Regina, Saskatchewan, and doing a workshop for the military, and down into the lecture hall, the presentation room, came some folks from the Rough Riders. And they said, hey, could we do something like this? And making connections to the CFLPA, to then Brian Ramsey, and then to Jason. And that was that sort of 2015, 2016, Jason, somewhere in there. And
that was when you were doing the bulk of the legwork, getting it off the ground. I rejoined the PA in 2017 and kind of joined you on this journey.
Yeah. So that's where it started, JT, and it was one of those pieces that it started out as focused on entrepreneurship. And then, with Brian's guidance, Brian Ramsey, the executive director of the CFLPA, we started putting, educational opportunities into that. And without tipping that too much, we continue to build on that today.
Nice. Yeah, and I'm happy to jump in there too, and maybe even, build on where we currently kind of sit, if that's okay with you, JT. But yeah, so essentially, from that point, and again, Brian and the executive really brought this as a priority, because we saw it, we saw the need. We know that the average career length in the CFL as a professional athlete in Canada is 2.9 years. So the best case scenario on average, you're not doing it for a long period of time. I like Scott's coined a term a long time ago, but essentially the thought being that, you're playing football, you play football. Admittedly, if you're going to be in pros, you're doing it through youth football, through high school, through college, and now you're playing pro. But on average, it's only 2.9 years, and then there's a whole lot of life after that. And hopefully, we can stick around football. We'd love to be able to be in the seats that we're here talking about football at various points in our career, where none of us are currently actively playing. But there's other things that might happen and pull you into have skills that work outside of that. And so, going back to even beyond the executive portion of the CFLPA, really talking to the membership at large and seeing what kind of things, a program like this would benefit that membership at large. And Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, but every time we ask, we get more answers than we anticipated, because we've got such a diverse group of individuals, much like, sport likes to do, but football specifically. I think you look across just even the body sizes on the field. We know that there's a lot of different individuals from every walk of life that come and play this game, and that's a beautiful part of it. That also means that, there's not a one size fits all transition program from football into life after football. And so having opportunities like education, but also having opportunities like employment or certifications that might not necessarily be in post-secondary academia, but more firefighting or becoming a pilot or things of that nature. And then most importantly, more recently, and something probably most relevant to this conversation, is overall wellness and making sure that, guys, the past 2 years, we had a year without football, and then we had this amazing year where we culminated in, I think, one of the best Grey Cups I've seen in a long time, for a bunch of reasons. Probably because I was, really, really wanting to see that happen again in Canada. There was a lot of ups and downs, I'm sure, for all of these guys, but I think the mental wellness has been so different for the whole world. And so that became obvious from the membership that we needed to support that as well.
And I love what you're sharing, and again, the inspiration behind it. And as you were sharing, what resonated with me is I just think of my own journey, right? Making the decision to leave a safe and comfortable career in education after 15 years. I know I needed to do that for my well-being first, right? For my wellness, the well-being of my family. I also understand that forced me to go to some very uncomfortable places, right? A lot of doubt, a lot of worry, a lot of insecurities, a lot of my fears, right? And it goes back to this idea, as cliche as it is, like, who am I? If I'm not a football coach, if I'm not a high school teacher, who am I? And I think that's something, that question has really, getting clarity around that has really helped me move forward in my life and really transform it. So I guess my question to you is, you both are obviously very much into personal growth and self-development, self-actualization. From your experience, why is that a challenge for so many people in terms of really knowing who they are, right? And I know that's a really open-ended question, but I sort of just throw it out there. Whoever wants to take the ball and run with it.
I'll start with that one, Jason, if that's okay.
Absolutely. I was going to say, you've got a lot of experience beyond our membership. So I think, yeah, if you can take it from the 30,000 foot view, and I can maybe even talk to the membership after that.
Sure. I think, JT, the big problem is for everybody, whether you're an athlete or not, is you just have so much information being thrown at you of what you should be comparing yourself to, that comparitis type of piece, whether you're an athlete, you're a professional, you're working in trades, your education, whatever it is. So it's harder than ever. I think the average stat now is with the American Marketing Association, you get over 10,000 marketing messages to your eyeballs and brain every day. So, carving out that quiet time to figure out who JT is, who Jason is a really tough piece. What makes it tougher, I think, for our members and all pro athletes is particularly football. It's almost a paramilitary setting where everything's structured. And I saw it with the military when guys and gals came out, they couldn't wait for the freedom, but it's one of those things that unless you know what to do with it, it's funny. You can drown in your own freedom because you don't have any structure going forward. And so when you've been at high school and college ball, told what to eat, when to practice, when all that kind of stuff, and all of a sudden, hey, there is no structure around there. I think innately, a lot of us crave that. And, I work with folks who are retiring, they crave it. 6 months into it, it's sort of like, I can't do this for the rest of my life. I've got to have some of that structure and to see yourself go beyond being a football player as our members do. And Jason, I'll let you segue into this one, is the idea that they have skills that they've acquired through pro sport that the workplace is hungry for, that qualifies them to take some more advanced education, is really one of the linchpins for the academy, is to let them know, as you said so earlier, what is possible.
Yeah, and admittedly, I'll try and segue, but you hit it on the head there. I think one of the things, if we're going to go and find a key word or something like that, I think an issue with all of us in that world is an issue with vulnerability, right? I mean, you have to be true with yourself, and that becomes really hard. And if you know what things you're good at, it's easy to focus on the positive always, right? But the things that you can work on is and that's reframing, right? That's another psychological term, right? You can look at things that you're not good at, or you can look at that thing as something you could get better at. And I think it's hard because you do that even with our membership specifically. It's maybe even easier to know, I know that my slant route could be run 10% better. I know where my cut needs to be, and you can operationalize it that way. But to think about those skills, like Scott alluded to, like the ability to think about that and be resilient about it, that itself is a skill that might be, good in a boardroom one day. And if that's something that you want to pursue, then being vulnerable and seeing where else that is outside of the version that exists right now, the football player or the athlete of any magnitude or version, is something that I think most people, myself included, probably have to deal with. And the sooner you come to terms with the uncomfortable nature of vulnerability, I think the sooner you come to growth, frankly.
The other piece, if I can, JT,
Yeah.
around identity is, they say that you're the average of the 5 people you hang around with the most. And, in the locker room in any sport, you've got that group of folks, and there's group norms and expected behaviors that, become part of your everyday. So part of the academy is to sort of shoot in some fresh air, some fresh ideas. We've got guys now in the locker room who are, taking advanced degrees, they're taking certifications, and all of a sudden they're doing that changes the environment for everybody, because now there's conversation. I think you said, JT, you had a conversation with one of our members earlier this week about this exact same thing. And Jason, that actually made me smile that, we're not seeing that or feeling it, but, through JT, we know that stuff's still happening. And I think that's right at the core of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, no, and it's interesting, right? Like, as you're both sharing there, I think of this, and I firmly believe this is a limiting belief, that learning is like you said, it has to be very structured. It's, someone telling you what you need to know and all this, right? And that's a conditioning. And again, I spent 15 years in the education system, and that's part of why I chose to leave was, when people can sort of choose to learn about things that energize them, that make them feel enthused, that they're passionate about, that's actually what, reframes learning, that, hey, it can be fun. And when I learn, I'm growing. And when I'm growing, I'm doing what all humans do, and really learning about the best subject, which is myself. So
if I can off that, you made me think of a book, and I'm not certain if everybody's read it. If you haven't, I certainly recommend The Talent Code. I can't remember the author right now, but admittedly, something that stuck out to me when I was doing my thesis at the time was this concept of deep learning, and the idea that you can learn something, but there seems to be times in all of our lives where you just seem to be a sponge, right? Why were you a sponge for that thing? And the idea is that it comes to motivation, right? And intrinsically motivating things make it easier to learn. And so if you know what you're intrinsically motivated to pursue, then getting better at that thing is going to be easier, and you can go further in that thing potentially over a longer point in time. I go back to music. That's not necessarily putting any dollars in the bank, I can admit that. But the amount of time that I'm spending happy doing that thing, getting better at that thing, potentially, hopefully, fingers crossed, that's the journey that's beneficial and therapeutic, frankly.
And that's when it comes to learning too, JT, because you and I both have that similar background. So much of that takes the student to regurgitate, please, what I've instructed to you, but don't synthesize, which is where the creative element comes in, to do things. And then that's the part of the brain that you could probably go through most of the education system without having to flex that muscle. And, it's great if you want to follow a path that's structured for you. I think we all have that inner voice, and I'm not speaking for everybody, but I think a lot more of us have that inner voice to go out and, try something that's, really amazing. I mean, Jason has, on various platforms, recorded music, great voice, by the way, Langvee music, if you're ever going to listen to it, is incredible kinds of stuff. I write, a lot of other folks do those kinds of things. It doesn't mean that it's our everyday full core thing, but it's exercising that muscle that allows you to see different options for yourself in the world. So that I think once you tapped into that word creativity, obviously I could wax on it forever, but it's just something that I think makes somebody really, come fully alive.
So I'm curious, again, I love what you're doing with the academy. I love this idea of, you're sort of you're serving a need, right? And the one thing that's really cool is the visions of your membership are shifting. I feel like a number of your members that I've talked to, they are developing their interests. Yeah, they want to be great on the football field, but they also want to be great, in their personal lives. They want to be great in business. They want to be great in health. What have you noticed as the academy has been growing in terms of, like, what would you say in terms of people buying in and seeing the vision?
The average age of the membership, that's engaging with us has really dropped. We often would get a lot of folks when it might be the last year and they know it, or maybe that they, were no longer playing for reasons that they didn't control. We've seen it go down so that we've had first and second year players sort of say, hey, I've heard about this. And now we can build that runway during the 2.9 years that Jason talked about, so that there's not a cold stop. And the other piece that, you know, has really happened is we've got a family and a spousal academy as well. So it's not just the players that are having access to the resources. Our partners have been incredible about offering similar products and offerings to the family and spouses. Sorry, Jason, that's just sort of like the introduction piece to what I know you can talk about a lot deeper.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, what we tried to do again is listen to the membership and see where this thing could go. And the reality is that we've got amazing partners that come to us and say, how do we make this more powerful for your membership? And so then bringing that back to our members, it comes to the things like exactly what Scott alluded to, making sure that our partners could potentially take some post-secondary education if that would help the family unit, which would help the player on the field, etc. And then going beyond that too, and I know that we're talking to you at Ontario Football, which is the front end of you know, the professional trajectory, but there's also the back end where we've got alumni. And so our association was successful in 2019, basically, you know, expanding our medical coverage. So if a guy gets hurt on the field, it's no longer 24 or 12 months at the time. It's now you got up to 3 years of access to be able to fully rehabilitate of that injury, which is crucial for making those individuals whole for life after football. But using that as a mandate, why not? Why would we cut off these tools that are helping our individuals transition when they stop becoming, or when they stop officially being members of the association? And so opening the door to alumni members for years, essentially beyond the years on the field. I think we see guys now, Scott's right, our average membership has dropped down, but we also see individuals on the other side bringing that number back up too. And that's exciting because it means we're more, you know, we're affecting hopefully the community of football more profoundly, which is absolutely the goal, right? If we can continue to do that, I hope I'm not overstepping, Scott, would absolutely be the goal.
Yeah, and just to be clear for those who are listening, it's not the number of members going down and who are engaging the program, it's the average age of the members, you know, they're going down. And the other piece that a lot of people don't realize too is that our membership is global. And, you know, we have up, 40-50% that come from the US. So now you're setting up an academy with education opportunities, employment opportunities, wellness opportunities. And, you know, we have to be on, both sides of the border, lots of different provinces and states. So, the journey has just begun.
Well, again, I love that. I love how you said, the journey's just begun. And, what I really picked up from both of you is this idea of, creating an environment, right, for the membership to really thrive. And it's interesting that we both, I feel, with the work at Football Ontario, with the Players Association, we're still serving the same person. We are just choosing to serve them at a different stage of life. So it's really interesting that I feel like we're kind of co-creating this powerful team, this support system around these athletes to help them be champions for life.
Totally agree.
So I'm curious, so we're more at the grassroots, right? You're a little thing. What can we do at the grassroots level earlier so that some of these fundamental habits, right, of like even understanding, who am I, right, off the football field? What do you think is something that needs to be addressed that's a possible solution to help the athletes become more self-aware and to really help them put in a position to thrive?
Yeah, I'm taking a deep breath on that one because that's such an easy question to answer. No.
But a profoundly important one.
Yeah.
I think if I can buy you some time, Scott, I think admittedly this conversation is the exact step what we need to do. And what we tried to do in the locker room is exactly what, the messages and the key messages that Scott and I hopefully don't have to come off like they're memorized anymore because we know them intrinsically, right? Is the idea that improving yourself beyond the football field is going to improve you on the football field. If you know how to focus your attention, if you know how to control your emotion, if you know how to work in a team, you know how to be a leader, all of these things are going to help you in the classroom, they're going to help you in the workplace, and they're going to help you on the football field. And so those are things that you don't have to live in the silo. You can live in the silo of football, but understand that those skills are also outside of football, and that you yourself are also more than a football player or whatever sport. And it's not to diminish the profundity of that identity, but to empower the fact that you are bigger than that, even as big as you believe that to be.
Mhm.
And so JT, to with what you and Jason have said, if there was a wish list, it would be to have, younger football players in the organization they're in, that the organization invests a little bit of time to invest in more of a life plan, as opposed to just a football plan, so that a lot of players, even when they're playing at the pro level, they really haven't thought an awful lot about life after football. And this is when the spotlight's the brightest on them. That's where the community wants them. It's where they're feeling. This is the pinnacle of their football lives, and it's hard to shine another light to get through that, to start thinking about that plan after football. And you can do it, but at a younger level, it might be interesting to say, hey, you go through Ontario football. You manage to get drafted. You play a few years, so that's now 2028. Now you're 30 years of age or whatever you are. What does that look like? So that would be one of those things, that you've obviously journeyed, in a couple of different ways for that. So you already, I think, have a good sense of what they need. I'm not sure how you integrate that, but it's more of a life plan. And then the other piece, just because we've seen it with all professional sports and all individuals, generally speaking, is it's fairly niche. So we can gloss over this, is financial literacy. It's sort of like you're making all this money all of a sudden, and it's sort of like let's just and then afterwards there isn't enough to move on in a way, or you've got deficits that you have to make up that prevent you from moving on. So a couple of conversations around that I think wouldn't hurt.
Mm. And it's interesting, like what I really heard from you, it seemed to be a theme that I harvested, was this idea of showing and helping people understand the power of of reminding people that your power always originates from within, right? That you always get to choose the direction of where your life is headed, the vision, the goals. You get to determine what your core values are. And I think if we provide opportunities for people to, like you said, like Jason, having this conversation, making people more aware of these bigger ideas, that may be that catalyst that prompts someone to make a different decision, right? That gets them open to growth. So that's really what I heard from you. Again, the power of reminding people the power always originates from within.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough. We're seeing more football players, coaches, and managers who are in tune with this. If we were to go back 20 years, right, Jason, you're an asset on the field, and as soon as you're not valuable on the field, then the interest level greatly diminished. And so maybe what's happening in terms of an academy level, at a senior level, at a professional level, somehow filters down into some distilled learnings to younger levels, so that it's not a fresh start with the academy when they hit the pro levels. So maybe we've just had our own creative thought there. I don't know.
And I don't know if it's too far a tangent, but Scott knows I like my tangents. But admittedly, we've talked about it. We're trying to do more with regards to mental wellness at the Academy and the association. And certainly, admittedly, the two teams that competed on Sunday are two of the teams that at a very high level are taking sports psychology and individual wellness very seriously. And in fact, the individual that we're working with for these webcasts works for the Grey Cup champion Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And that doesn't seem to be too much of it seems too, and it's not a coincidence that individuals taking the personal wellness of a whole team on a personal level also succeeded as a team. And I think that's a good change that we're seeing across. I mean, the pandemic changed a lot of our perspective. I think a lot of us, went through things that we've never experienced. And as a result, maybe we had to take it a little bit more seriously. But I think in pro sports, it's becoming more and more obvious. And I smile because, again, I was in 2015 starting my master's in sports psychology. And I thought, this is kind of one of those, I went back to school to go back to school because I don't know how to apply this. And I don't know how many, job opportunities in the future that might open up. I don't know what it's going to bring for me. And here I am, admittedly loving the fact that we're talking about positive psychology in the context of sport and in the context of overall wellness for individuals. And so again, I think this is a great conversation going to the grassroots, going to beyond athletes, frankly.
Mm-hmm. And what I really heard from it, I caught two things. The idea that the magic word is attitude, right? And Earl Nightingale, right, who's considered, the godfather or grandfather of personal growth, self-development, talked about magic. The magic word is attitude. And it's interesting, like when I thought about the Blue Bombers, the Ticats, that, thinking of the players there, right, your membership, the coaches, the support staff, that there really is sort of like a growth mindset feel from what I've been able to observe, what I've heard. So it's interesting that, that because that attitude's there, it's filtering down to on the field.
It's a performance, right? I think it always will.
All right. And the second piece, I love how, you're talking about the wellness piece, and really it's when the mind is, when there's order in the mind, right, the results take care of itself. So that's really what came up for me hearing you talk.
And when you talk about the wellness piece, it's not just the reactive. We have resources for players and families who are challenged. But what we're really going to is, instead of receiving the ball, we're throwing the ball now. We're proactive. So, let's have mental wellness as part of just like you would have a gym routine that you go to every day. There's check-in points, there's exercises to do a self-diagnostic to help avoid some of the bigger challenges by addressing them when they're smaller issues.
Okay. So I'm curious, I know you've been talking about it, obviously, wanting to, ask the membership, right? What are your needs? What are your wants? How can we best help and serve you? What would 10xing your vision be? Like, let's just say, I'm a big, like, let's think even greater. Like what would 10xing the vision look like for you?
I'll let Scott decide how far he wants to tilt his.
We talk about it. We actually have a strategy meeting with Brian Ramsey and Jason and I in January. And I'm sure this conversation, so maybe this is a part 2 when we get back together, if we get together in February, JP. What we want ideally is for when players sign their first pro contract, that they're actively engaged in the academy, and it's part of their life plan is to build that out so that there's momentum going through. And when you're excited about, you're not fearful about ending one thing. I think JT, you were talking about that before we went on air. You're also excited about going to something else, is to have players, doing that. And if we have the buckets of education, mentorship, we're building out different employment opportunities with different partners across, and have that on all countries that are involved in the CFL, because increasingly the CFL has, a global, CFLP has a global membership type of piece. That would be a wonderful piece. And I guess we have a lot of asynchronous delivery now. There's a CFLPA Academy website where there's lots of different lessons and modules they can go through. As you know, technology never sits still for very long. So, and players are, I think all 3 of us are probably like that too. When we want something, we want it now. Please don't wait. You wait for webcast a week today on something like this. So we need to put the resources in the hands when the players want it. Is that okay, Jason? I shot for the moon, but I didn't get quite as far as the sun.
Yeah, no, and I was just trying to, again, think, admittedly, I think we've got lofty goals for where this could go, because I think football is an amazing community pre and post CFL professional football. And so to that end, Scott mentioned mentorships. And I think Brian mentioned during our State of the Union last week that he and Jim Mullen of Football Canada have been in conversations. And I think that's an exciting step. Fortunately, we're in conversation with you as well. And the word mentorship, I think, is a profound one that I think could be an easy lift, so to speak, to be able to empower our communities and the individuals in the sport, at various levels. And then, who knows, right? From there on, we want to continue. The benefit of where we currently sit, Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, and I know you're not going to, is that we've got some amazing partners that continue to come to us and say, how can we make this bigger and better? And I know that's probably going to happen sooner than later as a result of those partners.
Yeah, I love everything, and hearing your vision, is energizing me. I really heard two things there. One, the importance of having a compelling future, right? Of really something that pull, as cliches, it pulls you out of bed in the morning, right? That, and I'll go back to that. That makes you, that energizes you, makes you feel enthused. That puts that that pre-kickoff fire in your belly, right? Giving a football analogy. And I just love how you're sharing here that when you do that, when you move in that vision, and I just think of what you mentioned with the academy, it's interesting how the people, the opportunities, the resources, the people that just, I want to help you, they just show up, right? It's that law of vibration. So I love it.
That's a good thing. The one piece too that to add to that equation you're just saying there, JT, is a lot of folks have inspirations or aspirations to move towards. What is a challenge sometimes is it stays in their head. And I view the academy as, I think, if you've read Seth Godin's book, it's called The Practice. And one of my favorite quotes there is he says, do what you love is a good start. Love what you do is what actually gives the traction. And so I always view the academy as we want to help them love what they do. Not only will we find what their inspiration is, but we want to give them the tools to practice their own success, both on and off the field.
Yeah. Power of habit.
Yeah.
Okay. So I have one last question for you. I want to be respectful of your time and energy. One thing I often remind people is that challenges, setbacks, obstacles, they're part of the game of life. It's not that we want to expect them, but we just understand they do pop up from time to time. So I'm curious, what is a piece of advice, maybe a suggestion you would offer someone that's maybe going through kind of one of those challenging times right now? Some focused action they could take to activate, to create some positive momentum and get back on their journey to greatness.
I'm happy to start, Scott, if you want. So the word that, again, this is something going back to the very first webcast that we did on mental wellness, but it's something I think in football and in the world of specifically maybe male sports, because that's the environment that I was around. The idea of vulnerability and the idea of you don't necessarily, you make a bad play, right? A lot of us, what we like to do is outwardly emote really negatively to show the world that we're better than that. We expect higher of ourselves of that. And they shouldn't think that's our average and that's the best that we can do. And what is the biggest problem with what I just said is everything I just said was based off of someone else's perspective on you. And how is that going to help you the next time you go and make that play if the only person making the decisions is you? And so to be able to be vulnerable with yourself and understand that you have to be confident in yourself, because that's where the best play is going to happen. And then the perspectives are going to be, something that comes positively, but it was never in your control anyway. The only thing in control is you. So I don't know. I feel like I've found myself on the end of a tangent like I often do, but hopefully Scott's got some time to reel us back in.
That's because you're so good in trigonometry there, bud. So no worries at all. I know that's a very cool thing. I would think of this, that if you build a longer term path, and JT, you've got your podcast, Jason, you've got your music, I've got my writing. If it's all you've got is your focus on today and this week, if something goes wrong, it seems pretty huge. But if you've built a longer runway and all of a sudden, you have a challenge, the unexpected challenge, JT, that pops up, you can process that without the sense of impending doom, because there's a path that doesn't really get changed that much because of this one thing that's popped up. So it's that long-term, vision. So the habit that I love to have, and when I work with with people, is that I'm dating myself here, but Stephen Covey, it's still relevant today. He had something called Q2 time, which is where you sit back and you work on things that are very important but not urgent. It doesn't require a response now, and that's the place that you actually get to build your runway. So every week in my calendar, in my folks that I work with calendars, 2 times a week, 2 hours a week, where phones aren't allowed, computers aren't allowed, and you get to turn off the outside world and think about your direction, not about what's happening this week or this month, but next year. That's tremendously calming, because when it does come, it doesn't come as a surprise, because you've been building the step-by-step foundation for quite some time. So that would be one of those self-diagnostic tools I think is still relevant today.
No, I love them, and I love the simplicity of it. So I'm curious, how can we, or what can we do to help and support the CFLPA and the Academy with what you're growing?
Doing it. This
Yeah,
conversation,
exactly.
you know, admittedly, I think Scott and I, we've got, I said, amazing partners. And I think having all of our members know exactly what exists internally, marketing is probably a great thing that we could do. And being able to talk to individuals like you and having individuals before they even get to the CFL know that that's something that can continue to be part of their life if they choose to do that is an important message for us to get out there. Yeah, Scott?
I'd say the river flows both ways too, JT. You know, you helping us out here, but if there's a way because of what we do and the people we interact with could help benefit some of the younger players that are coming up too, that you know, in the future we should have some discussions to see what opportunities are there.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. What I heard from you is I have a feeling this is the first of many great conversations and just surrounding ourselves with strong and powerful people, leaders.
Yeah.
Okay. So first and foremost, Scott and Jason, I want to acknowledge you. I want to acknowledge both of you for the men you are, you know, the great husbands, the great dads, the great teachers, coaches, mentors, but most importantly, the amazing human beings you are. The one thing that I've really gained from this conversation is just seeing how passionate and how you just want to serve the athletes and really help them at this stage of their journey and beyond. So I really want to thank you for reminding me what life is about. It's about elevating and empowering people. And just thank you so much for creating and holding some space with me today. And
right to you too, you've provided this space for this message to get out to whoever's watching live and on recording, JT. So obviously, you know, you're the catalyst that's making a lot of good things happen. Congratulations.
Thank you.
We talked about what fills your cup, metaphorically speaking. And I think Scott and I agree that every time we get on an opportunity to talk about the things that we're doing and the things we'd like to do, but more importantly, the success stories of our members and the things they're going through, that certainly fills our cup. And having these conversations, hopefully it fills your cup as well. Thank you for that, though.
Yeah, anytime, brothers. So for all of you watching, all of you listening, here is my reminder to you. Knowledge is potential power. It's the focused and consistent application of that knowledge that actually creates great results. Scott and Jason shared so many valuable nuggets of wisdom today that will not only help you succeed on the football field, but more importantly, succeed at the game of life. So my challenge to you is to apply one of these nuggets of wisdom to your life today so you can reach your next level of greatness. And as I remind you every time in the huddle, you are deserving of greatness. You are worthy of greatness. You are greatness. Have an amazing rest of your day, and we will chat with you next time in the huddle. Have a great day, everyone.